Hey, hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for joining our LinkedIn Live event, Top 50 Insurance Technology Providers 2026. We're going to discuss a lot of shifts in the market from demand, but the competitive rankings, and most importantly, everybody's favorite topic about AI impact, right? So that's going to be a fun discussion today. um, we are gonna do set up some agenda right now, do some bit quick introductions at our end, and then get in the discussions going. But folks who are joining us right now, you know please share, where are you joining from, have you had your coffee, have you had your breakfast, or are you getting ready for dinner, what part of the world are you coming from, so that we get to know you, get to hear you, and engage and interact with you. But let's do introductions first, and we'll get started with that, right? So I'm Ronak. I'm a partner with Everest Group. I lead our global financial services research, and it's interesting time in the technology and technology services industry with the impact of AI. And I have a lot of fun kind of, dissecting how all these patterns come together and work with brilliant people out here. So we have one of the best teams in the world when it comes to insurance technology. So you're going to get a bit of a flavor today of that. So with that, Aurindum, why don't I go to you? We'll go in alphabetical order. So go ahead.
Thanks, Ronak. Hi, everyone. I'm Aurindum Mukherjee. I lead the Insurance Technology Research Charter for Everest Group. Eat, breathe, and sleep in all things in tech. With me on this discussion today, I have a fantastic team who led this study for PNC and LNA tech providers. Uh, Sohit,
So, or Divya, want to go next? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, I can go next. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I am Divya Jaiwar, Senior Analyst at Everest Group and a part of Insurance Technology Research Practice. And I'm really excited to be here today as we unpack how the insurance technology landscape is evolving and share some key insights.
Perfect. And I know
Over
Sohel is
to you.
having some audio issues, so let him figure it out. And we will get started. And I see Scott has joined us. And Scott, thank you for joining us. And good morning to you. You are in much warmer weather than what I am. Like New Jersey right now again started to be cold, so that's why the sweater is on. I was hoping for warmer weather to come to us soon, but I just kind of is playing a bit of a trick hide and seek with us. So, but again, thank you for joining. Really appreciate you being, and again, everybody else who's joining us. One of the questions I ask everybody these days is, from an AI perspective, what is one thing that you've been doing that you feel now AI is going to take away, right? So is AI is already taking away from you? So I thought, Anandam, I'm going to start with you again, right? So is there something from an AI perspective that you believe, hey, this is something that I used to do now, I don't need to, or I don't need to spend that much amount of time because AI is helping me?
well, on the contrary, Ronak, there's one thing that I would absolutely want AI to do for me, and that is recommending what to watch. Because Ronak, I'm old now, right? Right? Me and my wife, that have been nice that we have discussed what to watch. We have gone into those Reddit black holes, trying to sort of figure out what to watch, and we have slept after doing that for an hour, right? So we need some app to do that with AI capabilities. If somebody is not able to build it, probably I will do that one day by wipe coding. What about you, Divya?
Yeah, for me on the initial question, Ronak, like I love like how AI is my new travel agent. Like all the hustle from where to stay, what all to cover, how to make the most out of the trip and explore like low key areas. None other than AI can suggest me better. So I need not stress on it anymore. So that's the best thing that AI has done for me.
I completely agree. So my wife and I, we made a trip out of one of my work trips. So I was in Vegas early this week for Adobe Summit, and over the weekend, my wife and I went to Death Valley National Park. And the good thing was, I spent like less than 3 minutes planning the entire trip, which would have been taking both of us weeks of discussion to what to do, in which order, where to eat, where to stay. it created such a beautiful itinerary with the directions on driving, how much time should we spend in each spot, which hikes are better, what should we be doing. And I was so happy that, we could kind of get through something like that. So I'm like, it's AI is making life easier, or hopefully, Aurindam, for you, it should make it easier soon. Uh, and I think that's what is happening in the insurance space as well, right? We talk a lot about AI and insurance. I think this is peak event season that we are doing. Right, again, a lot of analyst events, industry events that are happening on the insurance side. Right, Limbra events last week in Florida and Tampa. A bunch of customer advisory boards that we did last week around specialty insurance and others, and then next week again, right, a bunch of other insurance events, insurtech events. So really excited to be kind of participating in a lot of these and see where the industry is headed. But today, I think we're going to have a fun discussion, right? So uh, I think we want to talk about one, what are the technology decisions that CIOs, CTOs, business leaders in insurance firms, carriers, brokers are kind of wrestling with. So we thought we've done a bunch of technology vendor recommendations or custom projects in the last 6 months. We thought give you some examples out of that. So let's do that first. Then we'll talk about the top 50 research that everybody is here to talk about. We're going to talk about life and annuities first, then go into the PNC insurance space, and then wrap up with some of our pieces of what we have seen broadly from an ecosystem perspective, right? Because this is not just about technology, but about, hey, how does this technology gets implemented with the right data process and integrations to deliver the outcomes, right? So technology for the business outcomes is what we care about. So we'll do that, right? So that's the conversation. So let's talk about that, right? And again, one of the things I did want to talk about is technology decisions that we've been taking. And we have a few examples that we'll share on the slide right now, so it will come up in a second or two. But if I look at the one that I do kind of really find it interesting is this conversation around sprawl, right? We have so many clients who talk about having multiple core systems, having multiple data environments, having challenges with the overall orchestration layers where they have multiple automations, case management, workflow management systems. I was with a lot of clients at Adobe Summit earlier this week on the marketing technology stack in the insurance space, and a lot of them spoke about, right, their CX and marketing stack has a lot of sprawl. So I think this has been a consistent theme for us, right? And this is where one of our clients had this conversation with us, and they were looking at, hey, how, we don't want to rip and replace our systems of record, but as we look at our systems of work and some of our systems of engagement layers, we want to be able to optimize it so that we can drive infusion of more AI, agentic AI capabilities, because this sprawl is something which is going to slow us down. And very interesting project that we did, right? Because there was almost 6 or 7 different technology categories as we put together where they needed help. The first one, they had a fantastic win. So as part of the automation COE, they have reduced their overall spend from 27.5 million annual spend on technology by consolidating to 2 suppliers, one champion, one challenger, and the annual spend is like as low as 12.5 million dollar now. So that's a very powerful consolidation, SaaS sprawl elimination. And I think it's not just a cost takeout mode. Definitely the cost takeout is important because it helps them to fund a lot more of AI initiatives, other investments. So the savings are important. But at the same time, what was powerful for me was the ability to see this live in action and seeing the value, and then they able to kind of look at it in a rinse and repeat manner, right? So now they're able to do this for CRM as an area. We are also talking about some of the other stack in the customer experience side. So pretty interesting activity that is happening out here, right? And Arun, I don't know if you wanted to add something out here.
No, so Ronak, what I would like to say is that I think this is the pattern that we are seeing quite often, right? So SaaS sprawl is now forcing carriers to move from expansion to rationalization with much sharper decisions around what truly adds value at the end of the day, right? The second cohort of decisions in coming up a lot in my conversations, Ronak, is build versus buy, right?
Hmm.
And it's very recent that an engagement that we did with a carrier, that a client, a tier one carrier approached us, who was approaching renewal of a heavily customized legacy claims platform, right? And over time, the maintenance costs had increased significantly, and more importantly, the platform was slowing down their ability to roll out new products and respond to changing claims dynamics. So the key question they were grappling with was, do we continue to modernize what we have internally, or do we move to a commercial platform and effectively reset the architecture at the end of the day, right? And the challenge here was a classic trade-off. On one hand, they had years of embedded business logic and customization. On the other hand, continuing down that path meant higher costs, slower releases, and increasing dependency on legacy skills. What we did here was structure this decision end to end. We helped define the entire evaluation framework, across TCO, implementation timelines, integration complexity, and the long-term flexibility at their end. So we also supported vendor shortlisting and worked very closely with both the business and the IT stakeholders to assess how much of their existing customization actually needed to be retained versus rethought. Based on this, the client ultimately decided to move to a commercial off the shelf claims platform. Now, this wasn't a perfect decision. No decision is in the current scene that is out there. So they did give up some flexibility and some of the very specific workflows they had built over time, but the trade-off was deliberate at their end: faster time to market, vendor supported upgrades, and significantly lower long-term maintenance. And this is a pattern we are seeing more broadly, that the carriers are increasingly willing to give up customization in favor of speed, scalability, and sustainability. Uh,
Yeah.
Given that, Ronak, anything that you want to add, given that
No, no,
all
and
this
I
conversation?
think this one, again, the point that you made, right? There is no right or wrong answers in the build
Yeah.
versus buy decision. I think this was a, I would say, whatever frameworks as an analyst we can put together in front of our clients, as much as business case that we do, this is also a conviction of an organization and the culture they're trying to build, right? Which is, are we wanting to build a strong engineering led culture where we're going to build and manage a lot of our technology pieces, or is it more of a, hey, we want to bring the best of the breed, work it together while managing the integrations for the future? And I think that was questions, right? So I think you remember, Arindam, that this was the conversation we were talking about. Hey, we are talking about componentized API based architectures that the vendors were offering them, but then we were having this conversation in the future, maybe that you need a lot more of AP, not just APIs, but MCP server access and agent access, and then a lot of servicing and access may happen through agents. What do you do by that, right? So suddenly we're talking about a very different architectural shift, and that's where the decision was, hey, is this R&D effort something that we want to do as a carrier, or this is something we want our vendors to do? I think eventually the saner minds prevailed, said, hey, this is complex integration, architecture, continuous refactoring and modernization of technology components. That's something which a carrier should not be doing, and you should have your partners doing it. I think this was very important as a decision that was being taken. And the other piece is, I think this is where I think recent Salesforce announcement around, hey, going headless, as the future, right, in terms of a model, I think it kind of spoke to that, right? So if you look at it, I'm hoping in the PNC, but also in the life insurance space, this is going to be a far-fetched conversation to a lot of core systems of record and other technology providers to go headless. But maybe this is the way that future would be. Hey, how do you build that agent orchestration layer to be able to use your systems to be able to deliver those operational outcomes? Will become a conversation that we're going to have a lot more, and that's where it's going to get interesting. The build versus buy may even get amplified as a conversation as we think about it. So I'm very excited, right? Because you have the Anthropic, the Palantirs of the world who are saying, hey, you could build using our technologies, right? The AIGs of the world are already doing that. And then how do we kind of, compare and contrast that, right? So Divya, I wanted to get your views, right? Again, there's one that you worked on, right? On the claims one. What's been the experience on that?
Ronak. So in this case, the client was a large PNC insurance dealer dealing with the rising loss ratios and driving the leakage and inconsistent claim handlings across the regions. So they had already invested in multiple tools over the time for fraud detection, workflow management, analytics, but they were largely siloed. So as a result, they lacked in a unified view of claims performance, and decisions were taken like heavily dependent on individual adjusters. So the question they were facing was how to move from fragmented process improvements to actually driving consistent outcome-based claims management. So what we did was work closely with the claims leadership team to assess their existing stack, identified gaps across fraud detection, severity management, and adjuster performance, and benchmark the leading claims platforms in the market. So based on this, the client made a decision to consolidate onto an integrated claims platform with an embedded analytics.
Hmm.
Now, this was not a small shift. It did require moving away from incremental fixes and taking a more platform led approach. But the trade off was clear: better visibility, more consistent decisioning, and stronger control over fraud and claim severity.
Yeah.
And this is really what we are seeing more broadly as well, right, Ronak? Insurers are moving beyond efficiency focused claims transformation and now prioritizing outcome driven decisions as well, especially around leakage and loss ratios, right?
Yeah, no,
uh,
that's and again, there was a question in the comments, right? So I wanted to take that as well, right? So there's a question from Arijit, right? He mentioned that technology without data strategy is just noise, right? So what is the underpinning data strategy? And I think this is such a relevant question, right? Because if you look at Aurindam, bulk of what we are doing in terms of our workshops with our clients, right now, we talk about, hey, how do you kind of manage the overall debt in the organization across process, technology, skills, and data and architecture, and then drive the change management towards it. And data has become the core component where everybody's kind of spending a lot more time on, right? And the other piece of trend that we are seeing is we were doing an evaluation of all the IT services deals in the insurance space, and one of the core themes that we saw was that large portion of AI deals are actually under the hood data conversations or data deals that we're seeing, right? So a lot more investments happening on data engineering, data quality, data governance, data migration work that is happening. So I would say I think the statement that Abhijit made does, I think, resonate with all of us. I don't think any of us would disagree, or none of our clients would disagree, where the data capabilities become important. I think the challenge for all of us is we have massive volumes of data as carriers, our own data, third party data, things coming from brokers and others, and we need to kind of make sense out of it in the right context. And that's where I think the conversation keeps going back to the concept that we've been writing a lot, right? And if you're following our research, we talk about this concept of moving away from systems of work, or maybe not moving away, but moving beyond systems of work to make this a systems of execution, where you're able to look at a single process or an operation and say, what are the data do I need to activate in that process, right? What decisions do I need to take from an intelligence perspective? How do I orchestrate the workflow and then govern it, make sure it's compliance and I am managing the risk? That the ability to do that data activation, decisioning, intelligence, process orchestration, and governance is what we are calling as systems of execution. Data kind of underpins systems of execution, because bulk of technology that we're talking about is how does the work gets done or how it gets managed. If we need to add more intelligence to it, we will need the data layer. So I think that's a fantastic point that was made out here.
Absolutely. And Ronak, let me just make this more real because this is something that, if you remember, we did last year, right? Large LNA insurance client with multiple policy administration and actual systems over time that invested in building a centralized data lake with the expectation that it would become the single source of truth, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, adoption from the business was quite limited. So underwriting, actuarial, and finance teams were still relying on their own extracts and shadow systems because the centralized platform wasn't aligned to how they actually consumed data, right? So the key question they were facing was, how do we move from a centralized data architecture that exists to one that is actually used by the business, right? And what we did here was, again, help the client reassess their data strategy from ground up. We worked with the different business units to understand their specific data needs, mapped data ownership across the domains, and identified where the current model was breaking down, right? And this also involved evaluating data platform, of course, components, redefining governance, and running a series of workshops to align both the business and the IT stakeholders on the new operating model.
Yeah.
The decision that they ultimately took was to move toward a data products approach with domain level ownership and accountability. And now I have seen that, I mean, this wasn't about replacing the entire platform. It was about changing how data is structured, owned, and consumed. So the trade-off was introducing more distributed ownership, but the benefit was significantly higher usability and adoption. And this is a pattern, again, we are seeing quite consistently. Insurers moving away from purely centralized data strategies and towards models that are much more aligned to business consumption at the other end.
And it's interesting, right? Because insurance is a space where I see the AI adoption and the further data investments for the AI adoption is not just centered on the cost and efficiency and experience layers, but also on growth layers, right? If you look at, obviously, the CX stack is where the insurance firms are investing a lot from a data strategy perspective. But also, if I look at sales services, next best actions, underwriting, and product decisioning, right, is where we are seeing a lot of activity. So I don't know, Divya, any comments you wanted to make on the underwriting one before we keep moving?
And I know
Sure, sure.
underwriting is a favorite area, Divya. You were involved in this, in the our underwriting orchestration peak assessment that we did last year. So please feel free to share your thoughts.
Sure, Arindam. Couldn't agree more on that. So in this case, the client was again a PNC insurer facing margin pressure driven by inconsistent selection and slow underwriting turnaround times. So this was starting to impact both profitability and broker satisfaction. So the challenge that basically they were facing was dealing with, I mean, it was very specific. How do we improve speed and consistency in underwriting decisions without weakening the underwriting discipline? So, what we did here was work closely with both underwriting and technology teams to structure the decision. So, we helped define where AI could realistically add value, not across the board, but in specific parts of the underwriting workflows. So, we supported the provider evaluation and like helped quantifying the impact on key metrics like quote turnaround time and loss ratios. So the decision they ultimately took was to implement the AI assisted underwriting solution with a human in the loop model. So for the simpler risks, decisions could be accelerated significantly, while for more complex cases, underwriters can retain the full control. So this wasn't about replacing the underwriters per se. It was more about augmenting them. So the trade-off was introducing some model dependency, but benefit was faster, more consistent decision making. And this was what we are seeing again more broadly. Insurers are not moving towards full automation in underwriting, but towards augmentation, where AI supports decisioning rather than altogether replacing it.
Yeah. Oh, this is a powerful case study. Yeah, Divya. No, I know that again, we do a lot of technology recommendations, strategy recommendations across data process technology as well as services around it. So these are good case studies to see that. So Arindam, I wanted to ask about the top 50 research, right? I know because that's the one everybody's joined this LinkedIn Live to kind of talk to us. um, I wanted to, hear from you, right? What is the driver behind a research like this? Like, why do we do this? What is the value for our members? How do they use it?
So, Ronak, as part of this entire top 50 exercise, right? So we evaluate over 300 tech providers across LNA and PNC, and from that we curate these two separate lists of 50 providers each based on different lenses and use cases, right? But the objective is not to say that this is number one and or this is the best provider. The real goal is to bring structure to what is an extremely fragmented and evolving technology landscape. what we consistently hear from our carrier members is that they're not looking for a universal answer. They are trying to figure out what works for their specific context, their line of business, their geography, their operating model, and the specific problem that they are trying to solve. So the top 50 is really a way to simplify that complexity by combining a broad market view with what we are seeing in actual enterprise decision making. And that's why in this conversation as well, we are focusing less on the rankings part and more on the kinds of tech decisions insurers are making, because that's ultimately what drives the right choice.
Yeah, no, and I think overall, if I look at from a top 50 feedback that I've been getting from our members is our ability to kind of do quick recommendations on long list of suppliers. Right? If I look at the inquiry response velocity that you guys have as a team has improved, right? Because if folks are asking for a particular operations area with certain integrations capabilities in a particular line of business in a particular region, who are the 3, 5, 7, 10 suppliers that you would want to recommend? I think things that would have taken us a couple of days is taking a few minutes or an hours in a data set to be able to kind of quickly respond. So I would say that agility is also very powerful in terms of supplier recommendation that is happening. And also the data set that you guys have built in terms of the overall capabilities of the providers and the frequency at which you are updating this and the way you're doing this, I think is fantastic, right? So kudos to all of you. So what's the results looking like, right? Okay, could we talk about top 50? You want to start with life and annuities first?
Absolutely. While we bring up the slide, Sohit, anything that you would want to share, that what was the key attributes and characteristics that you saw in the leadership cohort, the rank 1 to 10 for LNA?
Absolutely, Arindam. Thank you so much for this one. If we look at, so what we'll do is we'll actually look at the top 10 providers first. Basically, the top 10 ranked in our research, our top 50 report, and then we'll go to the whole list of top 50. So this is the list we are seeing of the top 10 ranked providers from our research. So what stand out here is that these are not just the large providers. They are platforms that combine scale with breadth across the NNA value chain. If you look at this group, they bring together strong market presence, wide coverage, across geographies and the product lines. And increasingly, there is deep investments in AI and the ecosystem partnerships that they're creating in the market. Another point is that many of these providers are not just solving one part of the value chain, rather, they are spanning across the value chain, which is including underwriting, policy administration, distribution, and even the retirements and pension, which is becoming increasingly important as insurers, look at more integrated platforms. Uh, Again, what also differentiates these top 10 in their abilities is to move beyond the traditional core systems and embed intelligence into the workflows itself, whether it's underwriting or servicing or advisor enablement. So overall, this set of providers reflects where the LNA market is headed, which is basically towards platform-led, AI-enabled, and ecosystem-driven solutions. And now, if we look at the full list, the expanded list of the top 50 providers, the picture becomes even more interesting. So, what you see here is very diverse and dynamic ecosystem in the top 50 list, the overall list. On one end, you have large platform providers that offers end-to-end capabilities across the value chain. On the other hand, you have highly specialized players focusing on specific areas like underwriting or just retirement platforms or distribution or customer engagement. And the mix is actually quite important because while insurers are moving towards platform consolidation, they are still relying on specialized providers to drive innovation in high impact areas. Another trend that comes through clearly in the increasing role of ecosystem partnerships, whether it's with hyperscalers or data providers or system integrators. Many of these providers
I think we lost Sohit or just me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And And again, one point again, I know Sohit will come back to us, right? That I was kind of observing on the previous page as well, is a lot of these folks are not just bringing technology, but are also bringing a lot more of operations capabilities, right? So they're bringing an outcome orientedness towards how does this technology applies into the business processes for their clients, and that's where their ability to bring the data capabilities, the AI integrations that Sohit was talking about, becomes very important, right? I know, Sohit, are you back? You want to complete your thought?
Yeah, yeah. Am I audible now,
You
Ronak?
are. You are.
I
Go
think
ahead.
there was some network issue. Okay, great, great. So what I was saying is that another trend that comes through clearly in the increasing role of the ecosystem partnerships that we are seeing in the market, whether it's with the hyperscalers or the data providers or the system integrators, and many of these providers are building their value proposition not just through their products but through how well they integrate in the broader ecosystem. So the top 50 is not just a ranking; it's really a reflection of how the LNA tech landscape is evolving, which is basically from fragmented point solutions to more connected, platform led, and ecosystem led models.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. Very interesting to see the results. And again, this is fantastic in terms of, and again, congratulations to all the providers being featured out here. This is a mix of startups, but as well as big folks. But now, Divya, let's talk about PNC, right? Again, I'm very interested to hear your views as well.
Definitely, yeah. So, top 10 among top 50 for PNC, similar to LNA, is a balance of between the core and the specialization platforms. So, we have core platform providers with strong market presence, along with providers that are driving deep innovation in specific areas like underwriting, claims, data driven decisioning. So the list here is not just about the size, but it's increasingly about breadth, geo coverage, how effectively providers are embedding intelligence into high impact workflows and adoption. So congratulations to all the providers listed here. Moving next to the entire broad list of top 50 providers for PNC, the broader top 50 really highlights how uniquely specialized the PNC technology landscape is. So, unlike more platform consolidated segments, PNC continues to see a strong representation among category specific leaders. So, whether it is a property and location intelligence, underwriting orchestration specific providers, or claims and decision intelligence. So these are not just niche areas, they're actually core to how insurers manage risk and profitability, which is why we see so many focused providers scaling successfully in this segment. And at the same time, we do have an end-to-end platform providers in the mix, but insurers are increasingly combining these with specialized solutions to address like a high impact use cases. So congratulations to all the providers in featured in the top 50.
Yeah. No, and I think Divya, thank you for covering this, and again, all the folks who have joined us live, and again, I see folks like Vishal joining from again Florida. We have a lot of folks from Florida, and again, you're making me jealous about the weather out here in New Jersey. But anyways, and Chirag and others, thank you for the comments. One thing that we do have for everybody joining us is an opportunity to go through the detailed reports, because I know it's very difficult for us to cover everything that we kind of write about these providers, the market, and other pieces. So, we do have an offer for all of you. You can scan the QR code on the top right. That will allow you to uh, you know look at the reports, go into the details of it across both the top 50 life and annuities as well as the top 50 PNC. We talk about what are the major segmentations of the market. We talk about AI use cases. We talk about hyperscalers and the role within that, the evolving system integration landscape, and a lot more between that. So these are detailed analysis beyond the ranking, right, which kind of is the substance behind all this analysis. So would ask all of you to kind of take out your phone, scan the QR code, or we'll also pin the link later in the chat so that if you're watching this offline, you are able to kind of request this report download for us, or if you need to speak with us, this could be a great opportunity to kind of drive that request here. So back to you, Arundam. Yeah.
Yeah. So now that we have looked at the top 50 providers, what's equally interesting is how innovation is playing out across specific capability areas. So in both LNA and PNC, we have identified a set of recognition categories that highlight where providers are really differentiating themselves. So let me start with you. Right? In the LNA version of the report, we have highlighted a few key recognition areas. What stood out for you?
Yeah, yeah. So, Arindam, that was quite interesting because the recognition categories in LNA report really give you a very clear signal of where the insurers are focusing their transformation efforts today. If you look at the areas we have highlighted the report, which are basically agency management and digital sales empowerment, cognitive underwriting, and specialized platform for retirements and pension, they all tie back to the fundamental nature of the LNA industry. This is very advisory led business with long duration products. So distribution effectiveness and underwriting precision becomes absolutely critical levers of value, right? So what's also important though is how this is evolving beyond just those traditional areas. We are seeing strong momentum in the workflow and low code orchestration as well as the customer engagement platforms in the market. So these capabilities are helping the insurers become far more agile, whether it's launching new products in a faster fashion, adopting to regulatory changes that are happening in the market, or delivering more personalized, contextualized experience to the policyholders. So if I step back, the recognitions are not just highlighting where the innovation exists, but they are really mapping how the LNA value chain itself is evolving, right? It's no longer just about core admin, or it's rather more about enabling smarter distribution, more intelligent underwriting, and much more dynamic servicing, I would say.
Okay, thanks. So if I had to summarize, so it's not just about core systems; it's about enabling the entire value chain, especially distribution and servicing. Divya, let's shift to PNC. What stood out for you in terms of the recognition categories?
Sure. So in PNC, the recognition categories this year highlight where insurers are focusing their investment. So we are no longer looking at the innovation silo. So what stood out is how providers are aligning high impact, decision centric parts of the value chain. So at the core, it is again underwriting orchestration, claims intelligence, and pricing intelligence, all the areas which are directly tied to risk and profitability. But beyond that, we are also seeing a strong momentum in property intelligence, distribution, workflow orchestration, especially as insurers are dealing with more complex and dynamic risks. So the shift here is quite clear. Insurers are not just investing in individual capabilities, but in the technologies that can connect the decisions across the value chain. So that's really the differentiation that we are seeing as providers that can move from point solutions to embedded end-to-end intelligence.
Makes sense. So if you look at then both together, the LNA recognitions are more focused on advisor enablement and long-term servicing, while the PNC recognitions are more focused on risk claims and decisioning, but both are converging toward better workflows and customer experience. So, and then that's an important takeaway because it shows that while the starting points are different, both segments are moving toward a similar end state that is more intelligent, connected, and outcome-driven platforms. Right, Ronak? Anything to add before we move to AI?
No, and I was kind of reflecting on all of these categories, right? And what's becoming more clear is some of these categories are very well defined individual ones, but the amount of overlap that is also starting to happen across the board and how do they integrate with each other is going to be the critical component, right? So there is also the other piece of question that keeps coming me, which of these work really well together, right? I think that's the question I have, is because they are not all architecturally built in the same way, they don't have the same infrastructure guardrails, they don't have the same partner ecosystem. uh, and that is where carriers will, it's not just about the who works really well for your use case in a particular category, but what works well in your environment, right? And that, I think that's the nature of what the research we have done as part of the top 50 is across these categories. We're able to kind of give you that details and intelligence as you're making those decisions on who do you work with, where and how, right? So I did want to kind of call that out. Yeah.
Thanks, Ronak. Now, pivoting towards AI, right? So Divya, we during this entire exercise, we asked a lot of questions to our providers who participated about what their innovation bets are, what they're doing with respect to AI, what the adoption looks like. So let's talk AI in LNA first. Where are you seeing the strongest adoption today?
Yeah. So in LNA, the strongest AI adoption is clearly in underwriting and policy servicing. And I think that's largely because these areas offer a combination of structured workflows and measurable ROIs. So in underwriting, AI is being used to orchestrate the entire process from evidence gathering and data ingestion to risk assessment and decision supports. This is enabling the insurers to basically move forward towards more fluid low touch underwriting models, which improves the speed and accuracy which is required by the insurers today. And on the servicing side, AI is being embedded into the customer and advisor interactions, whether it's summarizing the policy information, guiding next fixed actions, or just automating the routine queries. It's helping reduce operational efforts while improving the experience consistently, right? That's what really moving LNA from incremental automation to more intelligent orchestrated operations.
Yeah,
Got
that's
it.
yeah. And again, on the so then I think one thing we should offer everybody who's kind of joining us live is the opportunity to ask us questions, right? So feel free to kind of ask us questions in the comments as we talk about the AI use cases, but also broader other things that you would want us to answer in the last 20 minutes that we have, right? So, or in them continue, but I wanted to make sure we give this offer to everyone.
Absolutely, Ronak. Thanks. Divya, anything different that you see in the PNC cohort with respect to the adoption of AI?
Sure. So in PNC, like AI is again no longer experimental. It is becoming a foundational layer across the value chain. So what we are seeing is a clear shift from isolated use cases to embedded intelligence. Instead of sitting outside of systems, again, as we spoke, it now directly integrates into underwriting, claims, and even policy servicing workflows. So, where we see the strongest adoption of AI in PNC is claims and underwriting. So, in claims, it's all about automating FNOL, improving fraud detection, and accelerating the settlement decisions. Whereas in underwriting, it's more about submission triage, risk enrichment, and accelerating support. So, basically, helping the underwriters to handle higher volumes with better precision. And again, another important shift is towards connected intelligence, where inside from per se, one part of the value chain, say claims, are increasingly feeding back into underwritings and pricing decisions. So overall, AI in PNC is moving beyond efficiency. It's actually reshaping how insurers make decisions and manage risks at scale.
Makes sense. And Ronak, in my conversations, and you can reflect on your conversations as well, one of the key challenges that enterprises are facing is that they have access to all these AI capabilities, right? But whom to reach out to, whom to partner with to get those AI capabilities within their app or tech ecosystem? Because the SIs are providing the same AI solutions and capabilities. There we have the BPO providers, the intelligent operations providers, providing the sort of a similar AI capabilities in some shape or form. Everybody has an agentic AI solution at the end of the day. And then we have these tech providers bringing their own AI capabilities either with embedded within their platforms or as ancillary offerings at the end of the day. And I'm seeing interesting constructs. Right, I was speaking with a carrier a couple of weeks before. The carrier was doing an end-to-end claims transformation, all agentic, a combination of agentic and RPA. We should not be so gung ho about agentic, right? I mean, there would be some RPA involved in within that entire process flow, right? So one of the parties was the core native agentic AI platforms focused on BFSI. Right, the deal is still ongoing, so I'll not be able to name that provider at this point of time. And then we had a service provider and then the carrier itself. So it was a three-party system, a very symbiotic relationship where the AI platform is providing the capability to the carrier and the service provider to build and configure their agents, right? And the SI would be maintaining those agents at the end of the day, and the carrier would be sort of bringing their own solutions and expertise with respect to let's say, domain or the process knowledge that they have. So interesting things happening in this context.
Yeah. And the lens that I take in my advisory work has been a workforce specific lens, because what happens is the AI lens becomes harder to deal with, and it is a lot more. Um, Again, one of the clients this week at Adobe Summit described it as chaos, right? There's an AI chaos from a that we hear from all the vendors, each one bringing a new term every day. And she was kind of talking about 10 to 15 new AI terms that she's hearing every other week. Somebody's pitching to her, right? A forward deployed engineer to some other thing every other day. So that's where it becomes important to kind of break away from the noise and have this human led conversation, which is, hey, what are you talking about in every process that you run as a organization, right? Be it in your underwriting stack or claim stack or policy servicing or distribution, or your broader contact center, customer experience, marketing, whatever functions we're talking about from an insurance perspective. You're looking at the humans who are kind of delivering that work, and how do you want to kind of amplify that humans, right? So you move from the base stage of this is human getting augmented with AI. This is where the early adoption of document processing tools, right? Those accent neutralization tools on the contact center, right? So those basic tools start coming in, which are giving you a lot of power, from document generation to summarization to basic analytics that gives you more power. And then you move towards what I would call as from an augmentation to an accelerated, like a human accelerated mode. This is where we're talking about human is in the loop, right? So you're starting to suddenly have a conversation around where human is working with multiple agents to get the work done, but still in the loop. And then you could move to a semi-autonomous world where you're saying, hey, there is humans and agents doing the work, but human is on the loop or human is at the helm. And I think that's the design principles all our carriers, our broker clients, our reinsurance clients are now having to think through, which is, hey, if you're building this vision of moving from a human augmented to human accelerated to a semi-autonomous journey, in that semi-autonomous journey, you will have to think about how do you orchestrate the right agents? How do you kind of bring the right AI tools together? And that is where your build versus buy decisions are going to get questioned a lot. And that's where it's not just a build versus buy decision, but it's a temporal decision. Should I build now or should I build later? Should I buy now? Should I buy later? And I think that's the conversation we're having right now, because this technology is getting better every other day. So should I wait or should I make the decisions right now? What should be the foundational elements that I should start working on? And that's where we are seeing the saner minds prevail and the focus starts shifting towards reinvention of processes, the way the work is happening, the way the organizations are doing. If you look at all our carriers, they're moving towards this operating model shift, saying, hey, we want to move towards a product operating model or a value stream operating model. We want to organize our processes and workflow and data around that. So let's get all of that foundational elements ready versus trying to jump into all AI bandwagon, right? And that's why it's then becomes prioritization. And everybody's doing use case prioritization, right? Those high impact, quick ROI, but I would say let's go after the most visible use cases, because you want change to be driven in the organization. So I think that's my lens versus trying to take this from who do I work with, because somebody like AIG can say, hey, I want to build my own underwriting system and I want to work with a Palantir and Anthropic to do this. But there may be another carrier who says, hey, it's in my best interest to not kind of spend that engineering dollars to kind of build something, because I may not have the capacity to keep updating it, because technology today is Anthropic and Palantir. 3 years from now, it may be something else. You don't know. And that is the place where somebody else may take a decision that, hey, it may be better to buy now, versus to kind of build now, because hey, that's not the core competency. 3 years from now, I see myself doing it. And again, those are strategic decisions we need to take, right? So it's not about who do you work with or what kind of vendor you use. You have to use a multi-vendor ecosystem, because innovation, new thoughts is coming from everyone. But I think that workforce design layer, right, keeping people at the center of it in a AI world is hard, but I think that's the right decision to do, is what we've seen.
Absolutely, Ronak. Well, with that, I think we have talked about a lot about the individual providers. So let's talk about the broader ecosystem, right?
Yes.
What role? Because we did some analysis on the hyperscalers and the SIs as well, right? So Sohit, what do you see?
So, Arindam, I think that's a really interesting conversation. I think the role of hyperscalers and the system integrators has become fundamental to how transformation is actually being delivered in the LNA space, right? And I'm sure the same would be case with PNC as well. But hyperscalers are providing the underlying infrastructure and AI capabilities that insurers need to modernize their platforms and scale new use cases. They're basically enabling everything from data processing to advanced analytics to Gen AI driven applications, right? At the same time, SIs are playing a critical role in execution. So these are complex multi-year transformation programs, often spanning multiple geographies and line of business. SIs bring the domain expertise, implementation capabilities, and scale required to make the programs successful, right? And what's also changing is that SIs are no longer just implementers. They are increasingly acting as the strategic partners, helping the insurers define their transformation roadmap, integrate different technologies, and operationalize new capabilities. So, if you think about it, hyperscalers provide the foundation, SIs enable the execution, and tech providers bring the platforms. And it's really the combination of all three that is driving the transformation in the LNS space.
Yeah. And let's look at the data, right? Again, I was interested in if we move to the next slide, right? So we can see the hyperscaler data out here, right? And one thing that I was observing is if I look at the number of insurance technology providers that have invested in their cloud strategy and working with hyperscalers and also uh, working with multiple hyperscalers so that there is no single cloud vendor dependency has been one of the core themes that I've looked at. And the other piece, and I don't know, Aurindum, Divya, if you have a view on this, right? I'm also looking at data heavy use cases, specifically underwriting as an area. We are starting to see there's a favoritism towards one vendor versus when this is heavy regulated workloads. There is a kind of we're starting to see those flavors coming. Any patterns which are strong that you would want to share with us?
Yeah, Ronak, on the PNC front, right?
Hmm.
I was having this conversation with a lot of SIs, tech providers, and the carriers themselves, right? And one of the CIOs I was speaking with let me know that 8 out of 10 PNC carriers use Azure for at least with their data capabilities, right? The AI and the analytics capabilities that it provides sort of gels in well and is coherent enough for the what the PNC carriers want to do, and that was an interesting insight for me because 8 out of 10 is too much,
Hmm.
too much
Oh,
concentration.
that's interesting. Yeah. And so like from a system integrator perspective, right? If you look at the next slide, right, it was very interesting because I was looking at the landscape of system integrators, right? Again, these are all the leading system integrators in the market, and what's fascinating is they have partnerships with not like one or two but multiple of these vendors right now. So this ecosystem is also important, right? So it's not just about what right technology data vendors and hyperscalers do I choose, but also who are my right partners for the consulting implementation integration that I need to do, right? So anything that we should be kind of looking at this one, any key insights from
So,
here? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, Ronak, what I saw during my research and what was there, basically the conversation that we were having, I think I already mentioned that the insurers are not actually seeing system integrators to just implement one particular project and that's it, but rather they are seeing them as their strategic partners. And that can easily be seen in the commercial constructs and the SLAs that have been defined in the contracts that they have, right? So I think that is the thing which is changing, and basis the case or the outcome that the insurers actually want out of their engagement. That is the main focus now, rather than what are the frameworks or what are the pricing models that are there. Are they competitive in the market or not? So I think that shift is what we are seeing in the market.
Got it. And I know, Divya, you are always competitive, right? So the life and annuity space, we saw that the hyperscaler percentages were pretty high. But if you look at the next slide, the hyperscaler activity hasn't been that high, or the growth hasn't been that much in the PNC space. So anything you want to say about yourself or PNC as an industry? What's the delta there?
Sure. So, although like from if we consider it from a last year's iteration, AWS continues to command the broadest ecosystem pull, whereas Azure is accelerating adoption across the insurtech, while Google Cloud is holding its ground. So there's a strong fit for high scale, event-driven insurance workloads such as FNOL surges, batch rating, and claims processing. So we see that deep insurance ecosystem and partner depth enables faster integration of the third party data AI services and operational tools across underwriting, claims, and distribution.
Interesting. Yep, that's powerful. And if you move to the next slide also, right? What's your view on the system integration landscape for PNC?
Sure. So quite similar to how we have for LNA, right? Like the system integrators, they play a central role in ecosystem orchestration by coordinating with the tech providers, data providers, platform partners to enable the integrated insurance solution. So what we've seen in PNC is the tech providers just don't go for single SI partner, or it is again the other way around. There's a broader ecosystem which enable them to reach out to a larger set of PNC insurers and make sure that they fit in very quickly, and the turnaround time is lesser with right set of SI partnerships in place.
Got it. Interesting, right? And again, congratulations to all the vendors, right? Technology providers, hyperscalers, system integrators for kind of getting featured in our research, but also kind of contributing to our research. So thank you for that. And again, everybody who's joining us today, thank you for taking your time, listening to us, asking questions. I know there were some questions which we could not take. So Anil, I think you had one question which was about our view for insurance brokers and agents. Hopefully, we can get back to you and can share more details on what we see in the insurance space, and kind of talk to you about what are the intermediaries or the brokers and agents doing in terms of technology. That's a huge area of investment, and right now for the brokers, but also the overall industry, and then for us as well from a research perspective. So would love to kind of do a deeper dive with you on that. But Aurindum, Divya, Sohit, thank you for this conversation. Any last remarks before we close?
Well, I would like to call out the upcoming research that we are doing, right? Voice of customer across both LNA and PNC. We are speaking to more than 300 plus enterprise stakeholders, trying to understand what decisions are they taking, what's the rationale behind them, how do they choose their providers, how satisfied are they with their existing providers, what are the replacements that they're looking for, and of course AI adoption as well. So stay tuned for the same. The research would encompass both LNA and PNC, so stay tuned.
Yeah, no, looking forward to that one. Perfect. Okay, thank you all for joining us and listening to us. Thank you, Divya, Sohit, Aurindum, for this fantastic conversation and all the amazing work that you do. And looking forward to doing this next one very soon with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.